the Smiley Face Killer, or Smiley Face Killers. Have you ever heard about that? Well, we're going to tell you all about that theory, and we're also going to introduce you to the real Smiley Face Killer. All of that and a whole lot more right here on today's Charlie Crimebuster. What some people have said, hey, it's the fastest 30 minutes in crime talk. Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Crimebuster. Sure a joy to have you on board today. Hey, if you're listening to the podcast for the first time, hope you have already signed up as a subscriber. You can do that on iTunes and a host of social platforms. We also would encourage you to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and any other social platform you see Charlie Crimebuster on. For every week, you're going to get news you can use, and you're also going to get crime tips to keep you and your family and loved ones safe. Well, today we're excited about sharing with you about the Smiley Face Killers. If you've done anything in crime research, you know something about it, but we hope we can get you caught up on it in case you've never heard, or you have heard. You'll find some things you haven't heard, I can assure you. You see, the Smiley Face Killer theory, it all began in 1997. That was with the death of 21-year-old Patrick McNeil. McNeil, he was last seen, he was out drinking with his friends at some bar there in Manhattan. And the volunteers, of course, they all got together after he was missing, and they plastered the city with thousands of missing flyers. And McNeil's body, sadly, was found about 2 months later and 12 miles away. It was found near the entrance of the New York harbor. Now, police are telling us that they found no evidence of foul play, but there are two retired New York detectives, by the name of Gannon and Duarte. They were not convinced, and they pledged to keep working on the case. Yep, retired Detective Kevin Gannon. He insists that the drowning deaths of dozens of college-age men across America, that's since the late 90s, he's convinced that they're the work of a serial killer, and then he also kind of adjusted that from serial killer to serial killer gang. Not mere accidents. You see, the detectives, they did adjust their theory of a smiley face killer, singular, one-person killer. They adjusted it when they learned that several of these young men, they were killed in different locations in the country, and they were killed or drowned on the same day. Now, the theory of the 20-year veteran of the New York Police Department and his longtime partner, Anthony Duarte, they're at the center of an Oxygen documentary that was aired entitled Smiley Face Killers, The Hunt for Justice. He goes on to say that back in 2003, I saw there was like 30 or 40 new cases across the country. And he said, wow, there can't be that many cases. So he said, I started really looking at it. And then I got my partner, Anthony, and we kind of traveled around the country and we looked at these cases in an independent way. And we're going to share with you on today's podcast more about the Smiley Face Killers theory in a moment. But now, it is time for our Courageous Citizen Story of the Week. And this comes to us from North Carolina. A North Carolina pizza delivery driver, he was bringing an order to East Charlotte Apartment Complex. And it was just about a little bit before midnight on a Monday when an ill-tempered quartet approached him. No, they did not want a large pizza with extra pepperoni. Police told us that they had robbery on their minds. They ambushed the driver, and they pointed what looked like a rifle at his head. That's what WSOC-TV in North Carolina reported. Now, like countless others are doing these days, you see, this pizza delivery driver, he had armed himself for just that type of an occasion. And so he pulled out his gun, and he fired it at the robbers. That's what the station told us. And with that, the suspects, they ran off. The driver called 911, and the officers quickly caught 3 of the suspects near a laundromat. And 2 of them were taken to a hospital with gunshot wounds and are expected to be okay. Then police told WSOC that a 3rd suspect was detained and was not shot. And more than an hour later, the 4th suspect, he was dropped off at a hospital with a gunshot wound to the chest. and they said that he's also expected to be okay. Now, who are these suspects? Well, here's the police rundown. There was a 15-year-old charged after he was treated at the hospital. A 16-year-old was charged as a juvenile. Now, that's due to the state. They raised the age law that went into effect last month. It now says that 16 and 17-year-olds who commit crimes in North Carolina, well, they can no longer be charged automatically in the adult criminal justice system. And that in 2017, well, lawmakers then raised the age of juvenile jurisdiction for nonviolent crimes to 18. That's according to the state's Department of Public Safety. Well, there were some others. Toybus Banks, he was being treated for gunshot wound at a hospital. He'll be charged upon his release. And then Nehemiah McInnes, 20 years of age, was charged after he was released from the hospital. Now, police told WSOC that McInnes has several previous charges on his record, including motor vehicle theft, possession of a stolen vehicle, larceny from a motor vehicle, and that he has a history of resisting police. Now, police, they found that supposed rifle the suspects used during the robbery, and they determined, well, it was a toy rifle, painted to look like a real gun. That's what the station said. And the pizza delivery driver, he wasn't hurt in the incident, and they added that there's no indication was made whether he'll face charges or not. But one thing for sure, these dangerous scumbags, they were taken off the street. They were taken off the street with another good man with a gun. And Charlie here, we call him a courageous citizen. So hats off to this North Carolina pizza delivery man who is Charlie's Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now, our feature story is the Smiley Face Killer or killers. And while that theory was floated by two retired New York detectives, that did receive a lot of support, but it was also refuted by some top investigators. You see, nearly all of the deaths that have also been ruled accidental drownings involving alcohol, well, the FBI and several police organizations have researched the deaths, and they've concluded that there's just no link. You see, the Center for Homicide Research, well, they went so as far as to publish an exhaustive report called Drowning, the Smiley Face Theory. It lists 18 reasons why the theory doesn't hold water, including the fact that the smiley faces are a very common form of graffiti and that murder by drowning is extremely rare. Now, it appeared that even Gannon and Duarte, well, they've given up on the theory. That appeared in 2012, because after spending years and seemingly a significant chunk of their own money on the Smiley Face Killer theory, well, the pair stopped researching the case in about 2012 and turned their attention to, well, more other cases that might bring more money. Now, note I said appeared, because, my friend, they did come back. And they came back and they supported the theory more strong with what they termed credible evidence. And we're going to give you that evidence in just a moment. But first, we have Trooper Steve from Orlando, and he gives us a great tip on what to do if you're involved in an automobile crash. Now, every week we learn of people who are in car crashes, and sometimes, unfortunately, it gets even worse than the initial car crash, because they do not move out of the way of other drivers coming on the scene. Well, here's 5 tips from Trooper Steve of Orlando, Florida, and he made that available to us. It's kind of a 5-point checklist of things to do if you're involved in a crash. And we read about this from Click Orlando 6. He says, number 1, well, make that phone call. Call 911. That'll ensure that first responders will already know to head your way. Secondly, he says, are you okay? Is your car drivable? You see, a lot of drivers, they think their cars need to stay exactly where the crash occurred. Well, that's just not true. You see, staying in the road could lead to a secondary crash and cause way more harm. Clear the lanes if you can, and advise law enforcement exactly where you moved your vehicle or the vehicles. He also suggests that you have your documents ready. You see, having everything organized, that just kind of sets you up for the case that happens. See, nobody wants to be in a crash, but having your driver's license, proof of insurance, and that vehicle registration card, well, having that readily available, it'll ease a lot of that stress. He also encourages us to identify any witnesses and be sure to take pictures. You see, after you moved your cars, if you're able, you've notified law enforcement where you are, you have all your paperwork accounted for, well, look around. Did anybody see the crash? Get the name and contact information of those people if at all possible. And the pictures, well, that's just a great addition, you see. Nothing nowhere says you can't take photos, even of the other person or their property. Snap away. They should be doing the same also. And he also says determine if you want or even need a full crash report. You see, there are times you might wait longer than expected for a law enforcement officer to get to your scene. If you didn't know, drivers can exchange information on their own. That's as long as both drivers agree. The key thing to remember if you want a full police crash report is that you will have to wait on the scene if you want that full report. Now, to be safe, you might check with your own state about state laws regarding this idea of moving your vehicle and the idea of just exchanging information. Now, our feature story is the Smiley Face Killers. And while it has been refuted and appeared that detectives have given up on giving the word out in 2012, they did come back, and they came back with a bang and an oxygen special on TV of the Smiley Face Killers. You see, that theory resurfaced. And the oxygen special on TV, well, focuses on the drowning of Dakota James. This was a young man who recovered his body, from the Ohio River on March the 6th, 2017. That was nearly 6 weeks after he went out drinking with coworkers. Now, the last known sighting of this university graduate, well, it was caught on a surveillance camera, and the footage had captured James entering a dark alley. And the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, it reported that the 23-year-old had drowned, and his death was ruled an accident by the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office. Now, that determination, by the way, was strongly disputed by Dakota's parents. Now, the Gazette noticed that and on December 2018, they did make another note, and they said Gannon and a forensic pathologist, this guy by the name of Cyril Weck, he held a press conference, and he reported that an independent examination on James Dakota autopsy, well, the photos indicated that he may have been strangled. That's what Gannon and Weck said, that they discovered the appearance of what they called ligature marks, which were inconsistent with a drowning death. Gannon claimed that James' death was no accident. In fact, he told Oxygen that he and Duarte, they believe that there's a well-structured, quote, well-structured, organized gang with cells in major cities across the United States. And these gangs, he says, they'll drug, abduct, and hold victims for a period of time before they murder them, and then they place them in water. He goes on to say, we look at these young men as being the best of the best as far as we're concerned. That's what Gannon said. He said they're the best athletes. All of them are affluent. They come from the best families. Anthony said years ago that these killers, well, they may have been envious, jealous of these kids. They had something that they didn't have. That's a possibility. And he also said, if you know anything about domestic terrorism, well, about these gangs in general, it's that when you have nothing to lose. That's where terrorism actually begins, according to Cannon. And, of course, the documentary also revealed a smiley face. A smiley face was painted on an underpass near where James Dakota's body was discovered. Gannon also pointed out that James, when he was found by the police, his body experienced minimal deterioration, despite being missing for 40 days. Yet, the Pittsburgh police, they said James fell into the river while crossing a bridge near the city center and drowned. It is believed that James' body traveled for about 10 miles and even went through a dam before its discovery. Now, more about how this theory is debated by some of the top criminalists. More about that in a moment. But first, here's some news. And it's kind of a real unusual news story. It comes to us from Marlborough, Massachusetts. You see, whoever broke into this man's home last week, well, get this, they didn't take a thing. They did, however, leave the home spotless. Yep, Roman tells us, the Boston Globe, he told them that when he returned to his Marlborough home from work on May the 15th, back last year, he said he could tell that a stranger had been there. Yep, a stranger had been there. And he called the experience weird and creepy, and he contacted police. And Sergeant Daniel Campbell, he says that the department, well, they haven't heard of a similar episode and that there are no suspects. Ramon says that may have left his back door unlocked. He thinks that perhaps a housekeeping service went to his home by mistake. Yep. You see, they left his apartment, his house, spotless. Somebody came in, cleaned it all up, and left. He has no idea who did it. By the way, if there is that kind of criminal out there that just goes into homes to clean them up, contact me, Charlie Crimebuster, here on the Charlie Crimebuster Show. I've got an address that I would invite you to, and we'll even meet you and give you a Diet Coke and sit down with you and thank you for cleaning up our home, even if it's by accident. All right. Not everybody agrees with Gannon's theory over the Smiley Face Killers. Over the years, it has been slammed by experts, and that's due basically to a reported lack of evidence. Some say it's nothing more than folklore. Even the FBI has their information. They say over the past several years, law enforcement and the FBI have received information about young college-age men who were found deceased in rivers in the Midwest. That's what the FBI said in a press release. The FBI has reviewed the information about the victims provided by 2 retired police detectives who have dubbed these incidents the Smiley Face murders, and they interviewed an individual who provided information to the detectives. The FBI goes on to say, to date, we have not developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths and any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. The vast majority of these instances appear to be alcohol-related drownings. Now, the FBI will continue to work with local police in the affected areas to provide support as requested. And back in 2010, the Center for Homicide Research, they also published a lengthy report debunking the Smiling Face Killer's theory. Gannon, he goes on to say he isn't fazed by the criticism. In fact, the Daily Beast reported that he's mortgaged his own home, even maxed out his own credit cards trying to solve those cases. The publication added that the only thing that stopped him for 18 months, well, he unfortunately had a bout of cancer back in 2004. He goes on to say, Gannon, I know that there are some homicide group that said we didn't know what we were talking about, but I never saw one piece of real evidence in that group to disprove us. That's what Gannon says. All they did was take articles from the news media, linked them together as a paper. He went on to say any kid in high school could write that paper. That's not a comprehensive paper. And so the documentary that has been run on Oxygen, it does give you plenty to think about. However, again, it is offset by the paper from the Center of Homicide Research. It tells us several things. Number one, that graffiti is omnipresent. In other words, smiley faces are all over the place. They were first invented in 1964. Since they've spread everywhere, smiles have become a universal symbol of happiness. They exist anywhere from children's stickers to commercial logos. And one reason that this graffiti is found everywhere is that smiley faces. They're the easiest form of graffiti to paint. They went on to say that none of the smiley faces exactly match one another. You see, there's no common paint stroke, no height, no width, no curl, no drip. You see, it makes it difficult to connect one incident to the next in the process of what investigators call linkage. There's no linkage there. They went on to say there's no evidence of victim trauma. There's no sign on the vast majority of those recovered remains that they did receive any form of trauma. You see, the Christopher Jenkins family, they alleged that their son was driven around the city for hours while he was tortured. You see, torture tends to leave signs of trauma. And there was no physical trauma identified, in this case consistent with an assault. And in one death, Patrick McNeil Jr., well, the evidence was present, but he was deceased prior to entering the water and did not drown. That was according to a theory. You see, the smiley face says that they're drowned as a cause of death, and that did not happen in that case. They go on to say the homicidal drownings, well, they're extremely rare. They only account for 0.2% of all U.S. killings. And of the few cases that are known to exist, well, most of those involve, unfortunately, parents drowning their own children. Or, on occasion, a husband who drowns his own wife in a bathtub. Now, we're going to put a link to that paper. We're going to list it on our website under the resource page, and I'd encourage you to take time to read it through before you come to any conclusion whatsoever. I would encourage you to look at the resource page. That's on charliecrimebuster.com. Now, however, I will on this podcast introduce you to, get this, the real Happy Face Killer. Yes, there is a real person who is a smiley face killer. You'll get his name and proof that he is who he says he is in just a moment. But first, do you hear what I hear?
Crazy. I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. I'm crazy. Crazy for feeling so blue.
All right, that's our crazy music, and that means it's time for our dumb crook story, the dumb crook story of the week. We call it the crazy crook story. And this comes to us from Clay County, Missouri. That's right, Clay County, Missouri, the sheriff's office there. Well, it appears they were searching a wooded area for a man who was wanted for possession of a controlled substance. Now get this, they were searching the wooded area, for the man who was in possession of a controlled substance. They were searching when, well, the subject passed gas so loudly that his hiding spot was revealed. And the department there in Clay County, well, they took it a step further when they posted on their Facebook page about that arrest of the man who was caught because he was passing gas in the woods so loudly that his place of hiding was revealed. The agency posted this on Facebook. They said, quote, "If you've got a felony warrant for your arrest and the cops are looking for you and you pass gas so loud that it gives up your hiding spot, you're definitely having a..." And then they have that little emoji there, the poop emoji. They say you're having a poop emoji day. Well, response from the citizens to that social media post, well, it was understandably very positive. One citizen commented, "You guys have put on some great posts, but this is the next level stuff. Fantastic. Thank you." And Charlie Crimebuster here, we say, if you're going to do the crime, be careful what you eat. The dog can smell and hear you, and in this case, even the human cops can as well. Better yet, obey the law to keep from having one of those kind of days. All right, back to our feature story. While I personally do not believe that there's a gang of serial killers killing young men and disposing of their bodies in a body of water, and go to our website, click on the resources, read the Smiley Face Killer document if you want to. It shows you, among other reasons, why I don't believe that. I do know that there is a Smiley Face Killer, and his name is Keith Hunter Jefferson. That's right, Keith Hunter Jefferson. He was born on April 6, 1955. He's a Canadian-American serial killer, and he murdered at least 8 women in the United States during the early 90s. He was known, now get this, as the Happy Face Killer, same thing as a smiley face, because he drew smiley faces on his many letters to the media and prosecutors. Now, many of his victims were sex workers. They were transients. They had no connection to him. Strangulation was his preferred method of murdering, the same method he often used to kill animals as a child. And after the body of his first victim, Tanya Bennett, was found, media attention surrounded a woman who falsely confessed to having killed Bennett with the help of an abusive boyfriend. And you see, Jefferson, he was so upset that he, the real killer, was not getting media attention. And so on a bathroom wall, hundreds of miles from the scene of the crime, he drew a smiley face. He even wrote an anonymous letter in which he confessed to killing Bennett, and he provided proof in that letter. When that did not elicit a response, well, then he began writing other letters to the police and the prosecutors, and he would use that happy face, that smiley face, on his letters. Well, to read a little bit about him, you can learn that at a very early age, even as young as 5, he would capture and torture animals. He enjoyed watching animals kill each other, and he also enjoyed the feeling he got from taking animals' lives. This continued as he got older. He would capture birds, stray cats, dogs around trailer parks where he lived with a family. He'd beat them and he'd strangle them to death, something for which he claims his father was proud of him. And in the years following, Jefferson said he often thought about what it would be like to do the same to a human being? And then at the age of 35, standing 6 feet 7 inches tall, weighing approximately 240 pounds, well, he wanted to work toward the goal of being a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. But an injury suffered, and that kind of ended that dream. So then he sought work as an interstate truck driver after relocating to the state of Washington. You see, Jefferson soon realized that that job would afford him the opportunity to kill without being suspected, because he would go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so he then finally got caught after his last death, and he really blew it because he actually killed someone that was linked back to him, and he was caught. And so there was actually a happy face killer. His name is Keith Hunter Jefferson, and you can read all about him if you want to study and find out about that particular serial killer. There was a real smiley face killer. Name, again, Keith Hunter Jefferson. Well, we always try to leave you a cyber tip before we leave the podcast. And this happens from Sanford, Florida, Central Florida, near where this podcast originates. You see, there was a man, he thought that he was going on a date with a woman he met on Plenty of Fish dating app. But instead of going on a date, he was shot and robbed. That's according to the Sanford Police Department. They say the plan was set up by a Seminole County high school student. You see, the victim told police he had been chatting with a woman named Kiki on the dating app, and they had agreed to meet during someplace down near 1001 West 10th Street in Sanford. That was back a couple of months ago. And the teen asked the victim to bring her McDonald's. That's according to the arrest report. Police said when the victim arrived at the address, which turned out to be the home of the suspect's grandmother, Kiki, well, Kiki got into the car with the victim, but then she said she had to go take a call. And when she got out, 2 unknown males approached the victim, pointed a gun at him. The victim said the males beat him in the head with a weapon, told him to give it up. The victim then said he was able to break free, and he started running, but one of the suspects shot him in the chest. And police found the victim near a home on Pecan Avenue, bleeding from a gunshot wound, around 2 a.m. A 911 caller reported the victim was banging on the door, saying he was shot and robbed. Now, folks, we have taken the time on Charlie Crime Buster to warn you about cyber dating, that it can be dangerous. And so for tips on how to date safely, go again to charliecrimebuster.com, go to our website, click on the resource tab, find dating safety tips. Now back to our feature story. How many people do you think do drown in the United States every year? Well, statistics in the United States says an alarming average of 3,536 people drown every year, annually, in the United States. That's about 10 deaths a day. But how many of those are alcohol-related? Well, alcohol contributes to at least 20%. And listen to this now. It increases with young men in the age group of 15 to 29. 15 to 29. That's the age group we're talking about with the smiley death theory. You see, 15 to 29. Every year, 40%. Over half the drownings can be contributed to alcohol. Alcohol contributes to all of that. Well, there are some things that we can learn today. We want to wrap it up with this. Number 1, if you drink responsibly. While there's no real proof that these young men died from a serial killer, that's only theory, it is for sure that alcohol was a contributing factor. Use it as an aid driver. Be a good friend. Don't ever leave anyone left behind by themselves. All these men were left behind by themselves, and they drowned, and they died. And number 2, practice situational awareness at all times. Again, it's hard to do if you're so intoxicated you can barely walk, so drink responsibly. And use responsibility in taking care of your friends. Situational awareness, my friend, is always the best safety habit you can develop. And last but not least, while I do not believe that there's a group of serial killers targeting young men and getting rid of their bodies in a body of water, that does not mean that I believe that all the drownings were accident. If you're an investigator, do not make assumptions ever. In our department, when I was a chief deputy, a suicide was always investigated as a possible homicide. You see, just because the young man is intoxicated, do not fall for the easy position that it was accidental. Chances are, in those 3,000 plus drownings every year, there could easily be foul play in the mix. Be a good investigator. The victim and the victim's family, they deserve it. Well, this is Charlie Crimebuster, thanking you for joining us and reminding you, till this time next time, be safe, be vigilant. The life you save, it may be your very own